Good evening. My name is Julio Arroyo, Director of Maintenance Operations Safety for the Mill Valley School District. Tonight, we have our Mill Valley School District Facilities Modernization Projects and Middle School Update Community Meeting. Thank you for joining us tonight. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand it off to Andrea before we do our introductions. Andrea is with Into Action. They're our facilitation team here, and so they'll go over what we're going to be doing for facilitation, how we'll be getting questions, and just kind of how the protocols for the meeting.
Thanks, Julio. So welcome, everybody, and thanks for being here. So we're in school, and I'm going to just start with a few, I want to call them rules, but guidances. So meeting norms. Let's keep students and learning at the center. Speak to each other with kindness and respect. Listen to each other with compassion and curiosity. Be part of the solution. Okay. Thank you. So again, I'm so happy that you're all here, and we have a lot of information to share with you this evening. And that includes, so we're trying to address your concerns about hazardous toxins, also concerns about how we keep students and people safe during construction. And then we'll end up with a preview of design. So there's a lot to cover today. There's several presentations, and the way that we're going to approach this is we're going to ask you to use Slido. We like using Slido because it's a very equitable form of everyone's questions being answered in the order that they gave it. So the slido.com and the numbers here, and they're also on your chairs, and you can use the QR codes for an easy access. We're going to hold questions until the end of each presentation, and then we'll take maybe 5 or 6 questions or as many as we can to ensure that we get through all the presentations. So I'm going to ask you to bear with us. We're going to time check a lot because we want to make sure we give you the information. You've got the Slido number. Questions are taken in queue. And if you don't have internet access, or for any reason you're not able to use this Slido, how are you? Please, we have comment cards. Raise your hand. We'll bring one over to you. You can write your question down. Let's have a great evening together.
Thank you. So for introductions tonight, so as part of the Mill Valley School District, like I was saying, my name is Julio Arroyo, Director of Maintenance Operations and Safety. To my right at the end of our chairs here is Elizabeth Kaufman. She's our superintendent. Also, Paulo Renee, we have as our assistant superintendent. Into Action, who's Andrea is here with her team, with us Andrea Baker, Parisha Ball, and Jada Owens, and then our AECOM, who are our program and construction managers for our modernization projects. We have Sandrine Hitchcock, who's our program manager. Joining us also is Nino and Moore. They'll have a portion of the presentation. We have Ryan Bass and Dwayne Blamer with Nino and Moore. They're environmental consultants. And our general contractor for the Mill Valley Middle School project, representing Flint, is Mark Manucci, and as well as Lionakis, who are architects assigned to the Mill Valley Middle School project. We have Laura Noss and Mark Jewell. So we will go in like Andrea was saying. So we have several portions of the presentation, and to be able to answer questions, we'll break after each presentation to be able to give an opportunity to answer any questions and go through that process. So in addition to what Andrea said, so really our focus for the meeting is to talk about the concerns we heard from the temporary campus as well as the permanent campus for the middle school site, go over the assessment that's going to be done and the protocols that will be put in place by Flint, our general contractor for the project, mitigation for safety during the construction, as well as long-term monitoring of the site. And then any questions related to environmental scope, construction safety, and the proposed design would be applicable to the information that we're going to be talking about today. And so we have our environmental assessment background and overview that's going to be provided by Nino and Moore. We have our safety and protection measures that will be by Flint Construction, Mark Manucci, and then elementary school modernization, as well as the middle school will be provided by AECOM, and then their middle school design update, which also will be provided by Lionakis. This will Our presentation will also be on our website, in case you would like to look for it after the meeting as well. So perfect. I will hand it off to Nino and Moore, who will go over the environmental assessment to give background and an overview.
Hi, my name is Ryan Bass with Nino and More. I'm just going to go over this quick slide. It's just an overview of what we'll be discussing today. We're going to talk mainly about the preliminary endangerment assessment that we will be conducting for this middle school redevelopment project and go over the details and outline what will all be included in that, as well as address some concerns and questions that we've received from the site regarding different classifications, um, and stuff like that. So I will go ahead and pass this off to Dwayne to give an overview of Nino and More.
Thanks, Ryan. Can you give us the next slide, please? So my name is Dwayne Blamer. I'm the Director of Environmental Services for Nino and More. I manage the environmental practice for all of our offices. I have over 30 years of experience in the environmental industry, and 15 of those are with Nino and More. A little bit about us. We were established in 1986. So we have 38 years of experience in the industry. We have approximately 550 employees spread across 15 offices in the west and the southwest of the U.S. 8 of those offices are in California. Our primary service areas include geotechnical engineering, environmental, and construction services, which includes materials testing and inspection. The majority of our clients are public sector, including numerous school districts, as you will see. Next slide, please. This is shows our experience with landfills. We have approximately 150 landfills on this list here, and we've worked on all of these. Many of these sites are burn dumps, similar to the site that we're going to be talking about tonight relative to Mill Valley. And we're considered experts on landfills and burn dumps by Cal Recycle. Cal Recycle is the agency that oversees landfill management, and we assist in the management of landfill sites. We've been working with them under contract continuously since 2009. Next slide, please. We also have extensive school experience. This is a list of the school districts we have worked for in California, and there are many others outside of California. The majority of these districts, are contracts, are on-call contracts for which we work on multiple school sites within the districts. We're currently under contract for 2 of the 10 largest school districts in the nation, those being LA Unified School District and Houston Independent School District. We're also under contract with San Diego Unified School District, which is the second largest school district in California behind LAUSD. So lots of school experience. Next slide, please. So we've worked on 9 school sites that have landfills related to them. 8 of those are in California, and we have provided services on those similar to what we're providing on Mill Valley, which is site investigation and remedial planning. Oops, where? Okay.
Back,
Yeah.
Other way.
back.
Yeah.
There you go.
Back up.
There you go.
Okay, so we understand there have been some concerns about a couple of school sites we worked on in Southern California. These are the 2 school sites right here. Both of these are within the San Diego Unified School District, and we've been working on these for a number of years. The first one, Bell Junior, we are conducting groundwater monitoring and sampling since 2010. At the time we took this project over, it was out of compliance with the Regional Water Quality Control Board reporting requirements. We brought them into compliance, got them on a regular schedule of reporting and monitoring. And since then, we've kept them in compliance and continue to work on them. So we've worked at this school site for the last 15 years. The other one is the Noah Webster school site. This one we've been working on since 2009, doing stormwater monitoring and sampling. And in 2014, we were asked to prepare a remedial action work plan. And that remedial action work plan included installing a cap and implementing institutional controls. So the RAW was accepted by the DTSC at that time. And we also oversaw the implementation of the RAW. And we subsequently wrote a remedial action corrective report. We submitted that to the DTSC. It got accepted. And then as the last part of acceptance of the RAW, the district had to sign a land use covenant. In the end, they decided they weren't going to sign that covenant. So the district withdrew their approval of the RAW as well as the racer. And they directed the district to prepare a new RAW that would include actually removing all the contamination on the site. So that's the point it's at right now. The district has not made a decision how they want to approach that. So we've been working with SDUSD since 1995, so almost 30 years. During that time, we've become, a very trusted consultant for the district. I don't think we would have been able to do that without having performed very well on all of the school sites we work for them, including the two very sensitive school sites, which are, those related to landfills. But more importantly, I think we want to discuss your project. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan to discuss the PEA.
Thanks, Dwayne. I'd also like to just add a clarification or just provide a little background, a little info on another thing that's gone on with the Mill Valley site specifically. We've seen it's been referenced as a Superfund site, which in reality it is not considered a Superfund site. So there's a little information about what a Superfund is and why this school site specifically is not. So a Superfund site is a contaminated site that requires federal oversight and funding to clean up. It's considered Superfund sites are considered some of the most contaminated sites in the country, and they're usually put on the national priorities list, indicating they need immediate cleanup or remedial action because they pose a threat or potential threat to the environment and the human or public safety. Superfund sites are put on the national priorities list or considered Superfund sites based off of eligibility rankings. They're assessed by the Environmental Protection Agency, and then they're determined if they should classify as a Superfund site. One of the reasons why, well, the main reason why Mill Valley Dump is not considered a Superfund site is because it was never placed on the national priorities list, and it's not considered one of the most contaminated sites in the country. DTSC in 2003 evaluated the site and determined that no federal oversight was warranted, and therefore did not classify as Superfund site, and no additional remediation was necessary based on the current condition of the site. I think one of the parts of confusion that it might be is because the EPA ID. One of the things I think caused confusion about Superfund site is if you look on the Environmental Protection Agency's website under Superfund, it has the site listed with the EPA ID number. That is just any site that generates or receives hazardous waste or stores it is assigned a EPA ID, and that's just to track the waste and determine it's properly disposed of and handled appropriately. An EPA ID number doesn't necessarily mean that a site is a Superfund site. Next slide, please. So while the Mill Valley Middle School site is not considered superfund site and does not have federal oversight. It does have regulatory oversight from state and local agencies. Those being the state agency being the California Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Toxic Substances Control. They have the first school branch dedicated to school sites, investigating and cleaning up and remediating school sites. They are the lead agency on this preliminary endangerment assessment that Nino Moore is conducting for the district. The PEA, preliminary endangerment assessment, is pretty much a fact and data gathering assessment, and it characterizes the type, potential type, the location and extent of any waste or contaminants that might be on the site. That is, DTSC is the lead agency for this, and the PEA is required for the site because of the site's previous history as a former burn dump, and also because any potential redevelopment at the site would receive state or local funding. So DTSC is required to oversee and make sure everything is done in accordance with their regulations. Results of the PEA are used to make informed decisions regarding any potential development or remediation for a school site. The other site, or the other regulatory agency that has jurisdiction over the site that oversees everything, is a local agency, the Marin County Environmental Health Services, acting as the local enforcement agency, LEA for short. Their responsibility is to oversee any work that is done on a landfill or within 1,000 feet of a landfill. They perform quarterly routine inspections on all the landfills, but including Mill Valley. Their oversight also oversees, they provide comments and review reports for the proposed investigation to make sure that we are looking for everything that they seem could potentially be on the site. And ultimately, the investigation will help and the data will help prepare a post-closure land use plan that the LEA will require, which details the proposed development, any remediation or mitigation measures that are required to ensure safety of the public and the community and the environment during construction and long-term post-construction. The PCLU, post-closure land use plan, will be developed utilizing the results of the preliminary endangerment assessment. And as I previously stated, the PCO covers construction, the procedures for construction and post long-term monitoring of the site. Next slide, please. So currently, we're in the process of conducting this preliminary endangerment assessment. It's a 3-step process. And the overall intent of this PEA, as I previously said, is to collect data and gather information, but also to ensure the safety of the students, staff, and the community during any potential construction or remediation. The 3 steps of the preliminary endangerment assessment include step 1 is a phase 1 environmental site assessment. It's basically a review of historical documents to determine if any future investigation would be needed based on site history. The second step is the preliminary endangerment assessment, is where we actually go out in the field and collect samples and analyze for potential contaminants of concern. And then step 3 would be to determine any remediation or mitigation that is required based on the field sampling results. Because of the history that the documents that were available to review for the history of the site, we were able to skip step 1 and not do do a limited historical document. There was enough, DTSC decided there was enough to go ahead and move forward with planning a site investigation and collect site-specific data. And so we're currently at step 2. The district, to initiate that, had to get into environmental oversight agreement with DTSC, basically saying the DTSC will oversee and provide oversight and regulations for the district while we go through this process. We had a scoping meeting with DTSC to discuss the site history and overall a broad general approach to the investigation. And we are currently at the PEA work plan, where we outline exactly what we're going to do, the type of samples we're going to collect, how many, the locations, what we're going to analyze for. And then that work plan is submitted to DTSC for review and comment. Because the site also has the LEA as a regulatory agency, they also have a say in what we do as our investigation. So the work plan was also reviewed by the LEA, and we addressed their comments. Currently, we have the LEA's approval based off the work plan we satisfied all their requirements for the type of samples and the locations the investigation to be done. And as of yesterday, we just received DTSC's final approval on the work plan. So we currently have both agencies' approvals to go ahead and start implementing our site investigation. The next steps will be to implement that investigation, go out in the field, collect the samples that we need to collect, and then all the data we get will prepare a PEA report that will again be submitted to DTSC and the LEA for their review and comment. And then ultimately it'll be submitted there'll be a public comment period where the public can actually review the document and provide comments and questions that they might have. And based on the results of the report, additional investigation might be needed, or step 3, where you go to the response action, which would be developing any mitigation or remediation approaches. Next slide, please. So I would like to talk just a little bit in detail now exactly what our investigation. This is the summarizing the work plan that we have submitted to the agencies that we have their approval now. During our investigation, we have 44 soil boring locations. As you can see by the colored symbols on that figure, all the black symbols on there are historical sampling locations done, a few decades now, 20 to 30 years ago. So all the data we've collected now will be site specific and current data. Most of the data that was collected previously was done during the construction and development of the community center to the north. So while it's not specifically for the middle school itself, because it's all considered part of the same landfill, we conservatively assume that it can, guide what we were going to sample for and analyze for. So our investigation, as I said, will have 44 soil borings over 170 soil sampling locations. Each boring will have multiple samples collected at different depths. And the goal of those borings are to collect samples from the surface and within the waste, and then reach below the waste and collect samples in the natural soils of bay mud to try and get a full vertical and lateral profile of the site. Additionally, we'll be installing 7 soil vapor wells that will collect multiple rounds of soil vapor sampling different months of the year to try and get a well-rounded view of the trends and different temperatures and weather conditions that could affect soil vapor. So multiple rounds of soil vapor will be sampled. We'll grab groundwater samples and surface water samples from the creek that flows across the northern portion of the site. So it's a pretty extensive amount of sampling that we'll be doing to fully characterize the site. Next slide, please. This table just shows the types of chemicals we're going to be analyzing for in our samples that we collect. It's a wide variety of chemicals, from hydrocarbons such as gasoline and diesel motor oils to Title 22 metals, heavy metals, federally regulated metals, but also additional California regulated metals, volatile organic compounds, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, dioxins, pesticides, polychlorinated biphenyls, and asbestos. It's a full suite of chemicals that we'll be analyzing for just in soil, and additionally in water. It'll also include metals, VOCs, gasoline, diesel, and soil vapor. We will analyze for gasoline, volatile organic compounds, and methane. The reason why not each type of medium has the same chemicals analyzed for is because of exposure pathways to these chemicals. For the most part, chemicals in soil, you can be exposed to them certain ways. Some are, ingestion or dermal contact, some are inhalation, some are through vapors. So each medium, soil, water, and soil vapor, are specified to analyze for samples for chemicals that that receptors can be exposed to and could have a negative impact. And on the right, there's just a list of all the metals that are included in the Title 22 metals that will be listed for, including arsenic, chromium, lead, copper. Next slide, please. And with these sampling results, the concentrations we get, these results will be compared to the most conservative screening levels that are established by DTSC and the Regional Water Quality Control Board. these screening levels, because of the history of the site and the current site uses and the proposed future site uses as a school, are the reasons why we choose the most conservative, which are residential screening levels. Even though the site isn't a residential site, the residential screening levels assume the most sensitive receptors are on site. So these are the ones that we use to compare our contamination result or concentrations that we get. Just a little insight into how these residential screening levels are established. They assume the most sensitive receptors, which DTSC classifies as children 0 to 6 years old and the elderly. And they're designed to be extremely conservative and risk adverse. For example, the DTSC residential screening level assumes, for lead, assumes a person is at the site for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 350 days a year for 26 years. So while these screening levels are very overly conservative, they are used because if you use these conservative levels, it can be assumed that if you make mitigation designs or remediation plans based off of these screening levels, then it'll most cover every type of exposure or their most sensitive receptors. Next slide, please. Oh, and one more thing I would like to add about the screening levels is the residential screening levels. If a concentration exceeds those screening levels, it doesn't mean a negative impact is going to be felt by any receptors. It just means a site-specific risk assessment needs to be established or conducted for that site. And regardless of if we have any exceedances on our screening levels, we will be conducting health risk assessments, regardless if those screening levels are exceeded or not. And so then this slide just shows the contents, the report contents from our PEA. The preliminary endangerment assessment will gather all the data, get all our lab results back, and the report will summarize all the field procedures we use, any observations we observed while we were out there collecting the samples or doing the drilling. It'll include figures, boring logs of the borings that we did, cross sections to show a subsurface view of the site, any locations, the extent of waste that we have, the locations where it's at, concentrations, where those concentrations, the highest concentrations are located. The report will also include our analytical lab reports, summary tables that summarize the analytical lab reports. The report will have a conceptual site model, which takes into account the environmental and geologic location of the site, site-specific characterizations like location, extent of any dump, debris, landfill material, any potential chemicals of concern that were detected and where they're at, and it'll go through and talk about the potential receptors and any exposure pathways that those receptors could be exposed to any chemicals that we find. Additionally, there will be a site-specific human health and ecological screening evaluations. This is where we use the residential screening levels with the concentrations that we find, and we evaluate using the highest concentrations that we find and compare them and evaluate any potential exposure pathway or potential negative impacts that if the concentrations were to come in contact, they could have. Additionally, the site will also do a sea level rise assessment. And this is just mainly related to how projected sea level rise scenarios would potentially impact and interact with contaminants that are found at the site, and helps to determine any decisions and plans going forward to help mitigate any potential sea level rise and how that would interact with the chemicals that are specifically at the site at the concentrations they are. And at the end of the report, we'll have conclusions and recommendations, summarizing everything we've done. And the recommendations can either be, we believe additional sampling is necessary to further define some areas of the site, or we believe the site is ready for remediation or mitigation. And then you'd go to step 3, which is actually looking at developing those remediation methods and looking at costs and stuff to actually perform that. And it would also be used to develop the post-closure land use plan, which is required by the LEA. And that report will also be available for public review after DTSC and LEA have a chance to comment and provide their feedback. And that summarizes, that finishes my presentation about the PEA.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, Dwayne and Ryan. So first, I want to say that we have a few questions that are related to design and construction. I'm going to hold those until we get to those sections. And so we're just going to dive into questions related to this presentation. So the design from Leonardo Sidolin, and I hope I'm not mashing up your name. The design includes a large opening in the middle of the school. This would funnel the smell from the water plant to the school's outdoor spaces. Comments? Sorry. So many schools on landfills are considered cancer cluster schools that are listed under the PITS. Sorry, just moved. The PITS investigation. Why continue to take risks versus finding alternatives? And that came from Anonymous.
Part of the PEA process is to determine site-specific concentrations and contaminants. So I can't really speak to other sites that are being called cluster sites, but we don't have any site-specific data on this property in particular to make any judgment calls yet at this time.
I'll take the next question. It's from Anonymous. What toxic substance alarms will be in the school after it will be completed? Methane, etc. What will the evacuation plan be?
As far as evacuation plans and plans going forward with the site, that is what's all included in the post-closure land use plan that the LEA requires. In addition to the LEA's requirement for that, DTSC also has their version of that, which Dwayne spoke to earlier about our sites in San Diego, is the raw remedial action work plan and post and O&M plans. It's usually once remediation, the raw and the PCLU will outline types of remediation that are there, how they're conducted, how to safely conduct those. And then they outline procedures that need to be followed long-term for routine inspections, any routine sampling, or anything that needs to be done to ensure that the mitigation or construction is safe long-term for the site users.
You can take that one. This is live. Thank you. So here's another question from Anonymous. DTSC, quote, we recommend the district consider a conservative remedial option. End of quote. Noah Webster was 33 million. Can we define with DTSC before CEQA and update the $7 million budget? So,
Well, each school site is specific, and you can't really come up with costs if you don't know where any contamination's at or the extent of it. As far as the San Diego site specifically, the actual cost for the remedial action plan that was implemented wasn't $30 million. I believe it was just around $1 million, but because part of that requirement was to sign the land use covenant, which allows you to have a cap and active mitigation measures in place, but it also the land use covenant restricts the site to be developed for certain things. And if you don't sign the land use covenant and leave waste in place or contamination in place, then DTSC requires it all to be removed to not have any waste or potential contaminants there. So as far as this site specifically, we can't make any judgments about or any idea about what the cost would be to remediate since we don't have any site-specific data.
Right. I think we'll take the next question. It's also from Anonymous. Did Noah Webster walk away because of the land use or the projects was not feasible with a $33 million budget versus the lower budget that Nino was originally projecting?
The $30 million was the approximate estimate to remove the entire landfill from that Noah Webster site. If the district were to sign the land use covenant, then they wouldn't be required to remove the entire landfill and it wouldn't be $30 million.
I'll do the next question too. Anonymous as well. What are the other costs associated?
Can we wait? We have just one more comment.
Check. So I think a question that people are going to have is why didn't the district in San Diego sign the land use covenant? Like what Okay, so you're gonna spend 33 million bucks to not sign the land use covenant. What does that mean? It sounds a little fishy.
Yeah, I am not sure why the district decided not to use it. Or sign that. We are strictly the environmental and oversee the environmental process when it comes to signing contracts. Nino Moore doesn't do that for the clients. That's the client's responsibilities to sign those.
So a quick follow-up, does that mean that site's not usable or that I mean, and if you don't know the answer, it's fine. I'm just I'm trying to understand where $33 million sits after, a $1 million effort at mitigation.
The $33 million. So when we looked at putting this raw together, it was a range of alternatives for the site. So they range pretty much from a little under $1 million up to $33 million. The 3 million representing completely cleaning the site to absolute clean, removing everything. The reason and we don't know the reason they didn't sign the Luke, but I think our understanding is that they didn't want to set an overly conservative standard. And they did go back and revise the raw a little bit, but it didn't include removing all the waste. It was an adjustment to the raw, and that was done last year. And the DTSC still hasn't accepted it. So I don't know what the district's decision is going to be at this point. So.
So how does the NPL designation change if the project disturbs the cap?
So disturbing the cap, the DTSC is the California arm of the Environmental Protection Agency, the federal. So disturbing the cap is being done oversight with the California Environmental Protection Agency. So it would all be done with their guidance and their approval of anything that needs to be done, that has to be done beforehand. So they wouldn't go back and look at a site for reclassified as Superfund site when it's already being handled and regulated by their California arm of the Environmental Protection Agency.
All right. I think we'll take the last question for this part of the slides, and any additional questions we'll take after the slides are done. My last question is also from Anonymous. Can you confirm that the reason the site is not listed on the NPL is because the cap is in place, but this project will require disturbing that cap?
Yeah, it's similar to the previous answer. Disturbing the cap doesn't automatically qualify a site to be relooked at or just classified as a Superfund site. It's oversaw, all cap breaches or anything penetrating the cap is overseen by the regulatory agency to ensure that it is done safely for the community and the site receptors. So while breaching the cap would be the most potential time anybody could come in contact, it's all done with regulatory approval and oversight during and after.
My fingernails. Actually, I blame technology. No. So we have a community center that was built on a landfill. I assume that same EPA number, there must have been an EPA number for the community center. Can you, with some level of conjecture, I know you've reviewed those documents, but how did we get a community center where our children play on a landfill and it's not considered a dangerous location for our children?
Yeah, so the former Mill Valley dump includes this site, the community center property, and the sewage property to the south. So the EPA ID number is for all three properties combined. They don't separate EPA ID number per property. And so when they breached the cap to build that community center, it was done with the LEA's oversight to ensure that it was done safely. So they didn't go back to look at it for a Superfund site because it was overseen by a regulatory agency. Quick question related. If they did this study for the community, why are we renewing this study? Well, they did not do the study for the community center because the preliminary endangerment assessment is specific for DTSE because it's a school site. But they did do some investigations to determine the mitigation measures during construction. For example, they had the methane gas monitoring.
Add on, yeah.
I'm just wondering, the people that are writing in the questions saying something about the Superfund trigger or whatever is how they see it. What if it was a Superfund site? What would be different to what you're doing now? You're saying it would never become a Superfund site because the EPA feels confident that the California EPA is doing its job in monitoring the situation and assessing the situation. But if it suddenly got this Superfund designation, what would be different?
Probably just a regulatory agency. It would be required to be cleaned up, and it would be overseen by the federal EPA and not the DTS. Potentially, yeah, they'd have to investigate the site, determine the extent of everything, and then determine remediation and mitigation measures. So it's very similar to what we're doing now, but the main thing is just the regulatory agency, the body that's overseeing it.
So we thought we would move to the next presentation and take questions after that one.
Okay, next slide, please, then. Okay, good evening. My name is Mark Minucci. I am with Flint. We're the general contractor that's been assigned to this project. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about our safety procedures and how we're going to keep students, staff, and the community safe, along with all construction workers. Next slide. I wanted to start out just by identifying our commitment to safety. As a general contractor, it's our #1 priority on all projects that we work on. And something to kind of identify that is by identifying a decent list of recent safety awards that we have received by very credible agencies, all the way up to OSHA, who is the Goliath of safety enforcement and protocols that must be followed federally and in California, even more so. And something that we do, we do this to get these awards, not only because it's just important to us to have that on our record, but also to really bring peace of mind to the communities and the districts that we work with, to show that we're not just talking the talk, but we're walking the walk, and we're being accredited by these folks. And it's not just filling out an application and getting an award in the mail. It's getting these folks involved, like including OSHA, to come out to our sites, sometimes across several months, and watching our protocols on site, our paperwork, and how we operate. And then we get their feedback, because it's important to us to really stay sharp with everything we're doing safety wise, because it's just as important to us to have the community and the students and staff on the schools that we work on safe, just as it is to all of you folks, I'm sure is the same level of importance. So that kind of gives you our commitment to safety as a general contractor. I want to identify that across all the projects that we work on, we don't have any incidences of safety or harm to students, staff, and the community. And we pride ourselves on that, and we don't plan on changing that statistic. Just talked about our partnership with OSHA, and we're partnering with them again on a current project. One big award is the SHARP Award, which, like I was saying, it involves months and months of interaction with them and site visits to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And I also want to identify that this school would be an active campus. We understand doing construction right next to an active campus, and that is exactly what we do. The majority of our schools involve active campuses operating right adjacent to our work, and 90+% of the work that we build is schoolwork. Next slide, please. So I know there was there's concerns about noise for all the students operating out of their temporary campus while we build for this scenario that we've been looking at. And, I'll identify that there's no way to completely eliminate noise with construction. It is just it's a fact of the process. But I want to reiterate that we do this on campuses all over California. And, we have never had a school shut down or lose a day of session in our work. And we see that there's a lot of, kind of pros to this scenario that we have here compared to our other campuses that we work on where we're creating noise it's quite a bit more detached. This temporary campus is quite a bit more detached from the active construction zone that we're going to have, which you can see that's surrounded by the red borderline compared to other job sites we're working on. And then there's also the multipurpose room, which is the existing multipurpose room, which creates another sound buffer from the majority of the temporary classrooms that we're going to have as planned here, as that you can see in the photo. And I also want to identify that we don't just go in and work with school districts and say, hey, noise is a reality and you're just going to have to deal with it. We also strategize with the school districts and the campuses we're working on to be sensitive to more sensitive time periods, such as testing sessions or sporting events and things of that nature, where we identify what we would be doing that day, and if it would be more noisy than average construction work, then we don't do it during those periods, and we work with the campuses to make it as beneficial and operational as possible. Next slide. So getting into student and staff safety and the community surrounding the school. I want to reiterate again, schools are what we build. We know this process. This is the setup that we have planned for this new school build with a temporary campus is nothing new from what we're used to doing. More often than not, we're working on active campuses, and we have zero safety incidences relating to the public or students and staff that are operating just right outside our borders. Something that we do routinely that really helps create this, this statistic for us is our routine safety meetings that we have with all of our crews every week, where we have a constant reminder of here's what's going on, here's where you can't be mindful of these classroom buildings, for example, being active right next to us, and keep that constant reminder so nobody's getting lazy about anything throughout the course of our construction projects. And something else is every new crew member that comes onto our job sites, they get oriented with the surroundings and what our safety protocols are and what the rules are of engagement on our sites to keep them as safe as possible. And then we give them a sticker that goes on their hard hat so we know who's been through the orientation, and nobody who hasn't been through the orientation is allowed to be working on our sites. So it's a good tracking mechanism to make sure that we're all one team and everybody knows the rules. Next slide. Fence delineation away from students. Certainly we will be doing this on our active construction zone adjacent to the temporary campus. And we do it with providing also a buffer as much as we can past that fence line, just to keep as much work in and separate from student activity as much as possible. You can see in this photo here, we have active concrete work going on. You can see the fence in the background and all the students going through a passing period, going to their next class. This is obviously a job of ours. And you can see that buffer zone that we've done as much as we could to keep the separation as much as possible. And what I will say is with the conditions of Mill Valley Middle School, I know that this buffer zone that we'll be able to create will be better in most cases than what you even see in this photo. Just given the distance away and where we have them, it's strategized to be located. If you don't mind going back, please. I want to talk about screens on our fencing. It's something that will work out with the district and the campuses. Sometimes it's good to have screens to block out visual distractions for students. As you can see in the photo there, part of the fencing is screened and then the rest is open. The screening was done because it was in front of windows that went into the classrooms to eliminate distraction of students when they're trying to learn from their teachers. And then open fencing sometimes is the right way to go to allow, staff to be able to see through the construction site to other areas of active campus to make sure they can maintain visuals of the students during passing periods and whatnot. And that's everything that will work out with the district and the campus during construction. And I already touched on that last bullet point of having a better buffer zone for this school project. Next slide, please. I wanted to show a case study to just give everybody an example of just a very normal construction operation that we do on our schools. This is at Casa Robles High School. We were building multiple new buildings all through the heart of their campus. Meanwhile, the rest of the buildings were full of students and completely active through the whole time we went through construction. And you can see that thoroughfare of students running between one portion of our site and another portion. The north portion is where we were staging materials. The south portion, we're erecting an entire building. Yes, it's very close to student activity, but through all of our planning and our strategizing and our crane pick plans, we have it dialed down to a T to make sure that nothing will be over the top of an active building, nothing will be over the top of an active student during our construction. And it worked out swimmingly, just like it does on all of our other projects. You can see, you might wonder, well, how do you get the steel from the north to where we're erecting with all those students running underneath? Well, we strategize, we're only moving material when students are in session and there's nobody going through that pathway. And you'll also notice the fencing doesn't have any screening. That was requested by the campus, by the principal, so that they can have line of sight across the site to see students on either side. So that's all things that we work out ahead of time. And it's not just to our standards, but it's to the satisfaction of the school itself. Next slide, please. I also want to touch on air pollution control because I know that's a big concern, and it's a valid concern. And it's something that we don't just focus on with Mill Valley, but it's on all of our projects. And whether it be just normal dirt and dust generation to naturally occurring asbestos in the soil to any other contaminants that we might find need to be mitigated and being aware of on this project. We are not a stranger to controlling contaminants such as those. You'll notice these photos are an example of a 60-acre high school site that I personally managed, where we disturbed a lot of earth through earthwork activities, which was definitely prone to creating dust and problems. And so our mitigation measure is to wet the soil down before any dirt moving occurs, and it worked out great. And we're going to follow the protocols that come from Nino and Moore's reporting and what we need to do with on-site air monitoring and follow those protocols. And it's not stuff that we haven't done before on many of our other projects. And that concludes my portion.
Right. Sounds good. Thank you, Mark. All right, so let's dive right in. For Flint, have you built on a former burn dump before and with students and teachers on site?
I don't know of an example of us building on a burn dump before. But we have worked on many sites with contaminants that had to be mitigated One example is just a recent project that we are about to finish that had methane coming up through the ground. And we followed all the protocols of capping that soil underneath our slabs, ventilation systems. It was monitored and inspected by inspection agencies, and it went perfectly fine.
Great, thank you. Good to hear. Is there a plan about the traffic added by construction crews around drop-off and pickup time?
Can you repeat that, please?
Is there a plan about the traffic added by construction crews around drop-off and pickup time?
Yeah, so with drop off and pickup, that's also another just not we're not a strangers to that type of operation, active schools. And there we have a plan that will ultimately be finalized with the district, but our plan is to have no construction access during drop off and pickup to inhibit that. And also our access in and out of our construction site is not planned to be inhibiting the drop-off zone whatsoever. If the drop-off zone is to be used, it will be pre-scheduled, and it will be during times where kids aren't being dropped off or picked up.
Okay. Next question is, if the foundation needs to go to bedrock, will there be an analysis of the noise pollution from the likely need to pile drive, steel on steel for days and weeks?
Well, certainly an analysis could be conducted to see how noisy the activity will be. And then it will be determined, I guess will be directed whether or not it's allowed to occur or not.
Next question is, will employees wear hazmat suits for elements like spray foam insulation if such a material is specified?
I think this will be also, if you can answer your part, and then I'll also ask Ryan in terms of giving some background of when that may be when that would be necessary, if at all.
I don't see that being necessary for installing insulation that was just brought up. But if there are hazmat suits required for the construction activity, then that activity will be completely separated off from the public to completely protect them, such as abatement operations. There's not going to ever be a time where construction workers who are trained and need to be in hazardous material suits protecting themselves are going to be doing it in an environment where those same hazardous materials are going to be spread out and put the safety endangerment into the public or the students or anybody else.
Thank you. One last question, and then we'll take the other questions from this section after the end of the slides. Which alarms will be required at the school? Which alarms?
Which alarms will be required at the school?
Not sure what the person.
Monitoring alarms, probably.
That's what.
Oh,
I
which-
assume.
Like methane.
Yeah, Ryan, you can talk about what would lead to the process of understanding what we need to monitor and just how it's been done in other projects you've been part of.
Yeah, so construction projects, especially contaminant construction projects, they're done with the environmental consultant and the construction contractor working hand in hand, where they're implementing their dust mitigation measures or other measures they need to take. And the environmental consultants are doing continuous live air monitoring around the construction zone in the workers area, upgrading and downgrading of wind, monitoring wind direction. So the equipment that's used is set to go off of audible alarms that are set through regulations. And if the alarms are set, work is stopped until mitigation measures can be put in place or it's safe to continue. So constant monitoring, and it's all determined based off of the concentrations and the results we get of the preliminary endangerment assessment. Everything is tailor-made to be site-specific and safe for any concurrent activity that could be going on along the site or the community.
So, Sandrine will talk about give an update on Strawberry Point and Tam Valley, which is our school sites that are slated for construction with our modernization projects this summer. And so she'll go over what's involved in that and just any additional information.
Sure, we wanted to share with you the presentation for Strawberry and Tam that was presented to the board on September 11th. We are currently preparing the documents to submit to the state for permitting. But just wanted to give you an overview of what those projects are. So, and they're very similar scopes. At Strawberry Point, we are doing a lot of ADA upgrades, essentially accessibility, compliance across the parking lots and the site itself. One of the reasons for this is that we are creating part of the priority one scope was to create an outdoor learning environment at each site. And that, I believe, the only site in the district that has a similar outdoor classroom is Edna. So it's kind of based on that model. We are doing a lot also of upgrades to the playground areas, kind of upgrading equipment that might be old at this time, such as the basketball hoops and backboards. And also upgrading the drinking fountains so that we have high and low options for people. And also upgrading the electrical panels that are getting a little old and providing upgrades to the fire alarm system. So that's generally the scope of work for Strawberry. On the next slide, specifically, you're going to see what that outdoor learning environment is. Essentially a classroom that's meant not just for the garden area, but it's an opportunity for any type of classrooms to gather outside and have activities different than it would be in a classroom environment or indoor classroom environment. All the sites currently have gardens. We're just going to bring those planters and areas to accessibility standards. So we meet the state regulation. And we're also providing some features that are meant to teach about sustainability, collection of water, rainwater, et cetera. So I think the sites are pretty excited to get those outdoor classrooms. Similar scope at Tam Valley. We'll see a view of the outdoor learning classroom. But again, similar upgrades for accessibility from the parking lot to the classrooms. We are one of the big item there is the upgrade of, or we're actually replacing the existing play structures that were outlined in the facility master plan as in need to be upgraded. And same thing, upgrading fire feature, fire life safety items, and a lot of ADA compliance items. So similar to Strawberry, essentially the outdoor learning classroom, essentially around the existing garden, upgrading planters for ADA compliance, and same features as the other site. One thing I want to add, we're obviously focusing on Strawberry and Tam. We are starting the process, the design process for Park and Old Mill. As we mentioned in previous meetings, we're staggering the projects every year to complete them within 5 years. So we will provide updates for those two sites in the next few months.
And next slide, please. Next is going to be our update for our modernization update for the Mill Valley Middle School, which will be, oh yeah, we'll go into questions and then we'll go into the middle school after the question. All right.
So there was one question regarding the elementary school. Is any elementary school work premature or wasted if alternative EIR middle school of Edna becomes needed Won't the elementary school work change to fit into 4? Would you like me to read that again?
Can you repeat the
There were a
question,
lot of
please?
thoughts there. Is any elementary school work premature or wasted if alternative EIR middle school EDNA becomes needed? Won't the elementary school work change to fit into 4?
So let me just repeat that. So the question is, will will the efforts to modernize be wasted if we need to consolidate our campuses from 5 elementary campuses to 4 with the assumption that Edna would then be the middle school? I believe that's the question.
So the way I would answer that question is the facility master plan outlined priorities for each site. The priority 1 list for each elementary school was based a lot on maintenance upgrades that were needed. And if you look at priority 1, 2, 3, 4, really priority 1 is, okay, we need a new switchboard at Strawberry, right? These are priorities that are needed right now. So no, they wouldn't be wasted because those upgrades are needed in the majority for those school sites to function. Fire, life safety, items that don't work or that needs to be upgraded soon.
Are we building any of these before we know the outcome of the CEQA process? No, you're correct. Our CEQA, I believe, concludes in April to June, July. I don't believe it'll
July.
be.
So it would be
building.
the Ham and Strawberry construction at that time. In the summer.
Okay. Yeah, we will get to the middle school in a second. I just want to make sure that we capture it. I think again, the question was around the actual building facades, basically the outside of the buildings. If we were to go ahead and build projects at Strawberry and Tam this summer, would that money be wasted? And as Sandrine said, it's really fire, life safety. And then the 2 play structures, which are adjacent to existing classrooms that would very likely continue to be kinder and TK classrooms because that is where the law requires us to keep our kinder and TK classrooms. So I don't anticipate any future development that would impact the work of this, work. And potentially, if we thought we were going to consider moving to either of those sites once we get our initial results, we could consider postponing the outdoor gardens. But at the moment, we don't need to pivot yet.
Sorry, just quickly to understand, you mentioned that the CEQA process for this middle school project is going to be over in April. Is that just to understand the timeline?
It's going to be in the next slides, I believe.
Oh, okay.
And I have to look at them because my understanding of CEQA is that something happens in April and then something gets finished in July. And I'm not quite sure exactly how those pieces fit together. They do.
Okay. We're gonna pivot to the middle school. First, those of you who were part of the July 18th Board of Trustees meeting, some of this will be repeat. However, we have not brought this information to a community forum yet. So we thought we would share this with you. This was the schematic design approval for the middle school site, beginning with the history and process. We had a lot of folks showing up at the board and community level that the rehashing of the history was a valuable piece in setting us up for the discussions around the schematic design approval. So the first is to remind everyone there was a facilities master plan completed in 2021. It was basically for the replacement of this existing building and not the other buildings on campus. We went through a steering committee of an advisory group of teachers, administrators, and board members, and they came up with a plan that we'll call the master plan. That exceeded to some degree what was identified in the facilities master plan. Next, please. What we did additionally, at the request of the community and the steering committee, is we evaluated single-story campus options, hybrids campuses, which partial two-story and partial one-story options in order to assess the best use of the site. And then we reviewed many site locations for both the permanent and temporary campuses. Next, please. The board direction to date was $130 million maximum construction cost, including the temporary campus, exploring the temporary campus development at the existing middle school site, that we would further refine the two-story option that we presented to them. They preferred it as it maintained open space and allowed future building on the site should it be needed. And that as everything we've talked about today, the CEQA alternative analysis will analyze alternatives to the proposed project that may result in a pivot of our direction. So the schematic design package, as I mentioned, was presented in July of this year. We talked today at the steering committee about this option as well. Basically, the two buildings you see on the southernmost edge of the site are the two-story buildings. 3 of those stories are the grade level pods for 6th, 7th, and 8th, and the ground floor of the central building, the library and administration hub. The existing gym remains in place, and a new arts building at the north end, single story, was developed. Next, please. The budget at the schematic design level, I mentioned $130 million. For the base scope of work, that estimate was at $134 million. For those of you who work in construction, you know that that's a pretty close number at that schematic level. We did also estimate the steering committee's desired campus plan that included a little more scope than the facilities master plan, and that was about $163 million project. So this is the existing campus. Next, please. As you all know, we are looking at a temporary campus on this site. Again, we were evaluating a temporary campus at the size and scale, i.e. the number of classrooms for that were anticipated for the permanent built-out campus. Next, please. While that campus is operational, the temporary campus, as Mark talked about, the new permanent construction would be built. Next, please. This is the finished site with, again, the board selected this option because of the significant outdoor space it made available for students, as well as the additional space available for pickup and drop off. Next, please. And the second floor of those two classroom buildings. So these were some of the schematic design level images. I'll tell you, they continue to evolve, but conceptually, a similar concept. The second floor outdoor learning space. This was an important piece to the steering committee that even if they were on the second floor, their students would have direct access from their classrooms to outdoor learning. and a central entrance spine that also serves as the primary exit, exiting from that second floor. So we have had some schedule impacts that have cost impacts. You've heard all about those today. We also are in the process of, the district is in the process of updating some of the demographic projections for the site, but we're going to go through a little bit of that preliminary information. Sandrine?
So as a slide I was mentioning earlier, I would get to about the CEQA process. We presented to the board last week an update on where we stand as far as the submission of the public draft of the environmental impact report. We are looking right now at what you were referring to, Elizabeth. The public draft would be issued in Q1 of 2025. Right now, we're looking roughly at February. And based on that timeline, we would expect the CEQA document to be approved by July 2025.
So at the time of the July presentation, we had the geotechnical or soils reports looking to be available in August. As you heard from Ryan, those are just getting started now. And I will also mention that a lot of the things on this slide are changing by the hour in terms of the foundation issues and other site-related things. Next, please.
Sandrine, can I just ask a quick question for the lay people among us? When it says EIR notice of determination, what are you determining? I can speak. I'm a superintendent. Determining.
The EIR notice of determination is essentially the last step of the CEQA process. The essentially DTSC will give you a green light that they're okay with everything in the CEQA document. We've incorporated public comments, essentially saying we've reviewed all the information, we've reviewed your proposed project, you've addressed or we've reviewed all the alternatives. We're okay with that document. The last step, essentially a ratification of that document, will be made by the Board of Trustees. So essentially, the district is the lead agency in that case that will implement the CEQA document.
So the mitigation measures would be factored into what the notice of determination
Yes.
is. They wouldn't necessarily be completed by then, or would they? Like, do we have to mitigate before we can start, or we just need to identify how we're mitigating?
It will be identified, just like Ryan mentioned, we'll also be working with the LEA on outlining as much as we can what the possible mitigation measures would be. But until the school district and specifically the Board of Trustees selects a project out of all the alternatives, out of all the options within the CEQA document, it would still remain possible mitigation measures. Once we have a proposed project selected or any of the options selected by the Board of Trustees, then there will be additional reporting and planning and design on all the mitigation measures that would be submitted to the agencies.
And that happens between February and July initially?
That would be after July.
Okay, okay. So determining basically that we are prepared and ready to move forward, meeting the standards of GTSC, meeting the standards of the LEA, and we are able to move forward.
Right, so essentially we have to plan for every option in that document,
Okay.
and that's when they would give us a
And
green
at the
light.
July meeting, the board would pick what its
What
option is.
option.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, thanks.
Next slide, please, Sid. So one of the things the district asked us to look at because of the potential delays and the escalation costs associated with those, as well as the capacity of the school size and the current projected demographic numbers was what would a reduced scope of work look like for the site? So the demographer is scheduled, it came to the board. We will or the district will onboard them in October. We do have some current projections from the 2021 master plan that we'll share with you that have never exceeded 800 students at the site. And we're going to prioritize that confirmation of the school enrollment. So in 2021, during the facilities master plan, the demographer came up with these projections for Mill Valley Middle School. They're highlighted. You can see 24, 25, they projected 782 students. There's actually 718 students. And so the numbers appear to be much below even those 2021 projections. So the currency of those numbers will be validated by the demographer's work. You know, if we're just speaking frankly here, we don't want to overbuild on this site because the dollars are scarce, and we want to make sure that we're being good stewards of that. So we're waiting on the demographic projections. Currently in the I'll call it the large model, what you saw in the schematic design, every teacher that is currently at Mill Valley Middle School has a room. So that is accommodated. We had talked at one time about how do we add capacity should the school grow, and that's where we did some assessment about what the actual capacity of this site would be. Up and down the state of California, the design as we've shown it would be a school for about 1,200 students. And as you see, we have about 718. So there is an opportunity there to reduce, but it will come with some operational impacts for how the teachers are currently utilizing space. Next, please. So Ryan has his own kind of technical data. In my world, this spreadsheet is kind of a capacity study for how we might look at reduction in capacity. We believe that a reduced scenario for the 718 students that are currently here, we could reduce the project by 8 to 10,000 square feet. And therefore save some of the dollars associated with that. That would remove approximately 6 classrooms plus some circulation and supporting spaces. We reviewed this with the steering committee today. They're probably the best folks to dig into it as teachers and administrators. But basically, the model assumes an 85%, that center scenario, utilization of each classroom on campus, which in teacher language is it's used 5 periods a day and allows 1 period of prep in the classroom. 100% model would be that this room was used 6 periods a day and teachers would go elsewhere to prep. And the 67% would be the model they currently have, where they teach in those rooms 4 periods a day and have 2 periods a day of prep where they're alone in that room prepping for that. So we thought the center model would be a good target. And so we went from an 11 or 1,200 student project to one we're proposing of about 950 students. Next, please. So again, we tested and put a name on every room. We looked at the demographic projections are pending, so we're not taking any action on this, but it is a release valve for us should we need to for cost impacts of either escalation or mitigation or other things that might become available or necessary. Next, please. And similarly, if we apply this model, there's an opportunity to also reduce the interim housing needs on this site. That combined with some operational alternatives the district is looking at could reduce the amount of interim housing on the site considerably. That's how the sausage is made. You don't have to dig in too deeply, but know that it has the potential to save $3 million or so if we can reduce that. So this is the pod concept that the steering committee came up with. As we flip to the next one, reducing 2 classrooms per pod. You can see how the footprint shrinks. And obviously when footprint shrinks, square footage shrinks, and dollars are reduced. Similarly, on the next page, the administration and library floor, it's shrinking, doesn't have much impact on the core facilities of library and administration. It just removes a drama classroom and has that as a shared facility with another classroom on campus. And finally, we looked at utilization of the existing gymnasium, orchestra, choir, and world languages in those existing classrooms while we maintain the PE portables in their place across the creek. So with that, you can see the reduced footprint of the buildings, the arts classroom at the north, and the dark blue is a footprint we've identified for future construction should it be needed either for capacity expansion or for alternative amenities and supporting facilities. So our team completed their design development drawings this week. What you saw earlier was schematic design. Our next level is design development. The estimate and of a third-party estimator as well as the general contractor is happening now. We will have a reconciliation effort between those 2 estimates to make sure it's as fine-tuned as can be, knowing that we still have outstanding data to receive. We're holding on that information till we receive the environmental data, and we'll have some presentation of that coming soon. So I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Laura. All right, we've got about 8 questions regarding design. And I will dive in and we'll see how many of those we can get done. Was the 130 million board direction for total costs or just hard costs? Since I understand with soft costs and only $7 million of mitigation for soils, we are over 165 million. Shall I read it again? Yes. Was the $130 million that the board from board direction for total costs or just hard costs? Since I understand that with soft costs and only $7 million of mitigation for soil, we are already over 165 million.
The $130 million are hard cost construction and included the mitigation costs.
The next question is, how is acoustics addressed in the design?
I'm going to assume that's a question about like classroom acoustics and the learning environment. We are required by code to meet an ASTM standard for classroom design that includes everything from acoustical treatment in the classrooms, the glazing material to keep outside noise, even gasketing around the and around the doors and frames. Now, if teachers keep all their doors and windows open, right? Then we don't control that, but the environment that we can control is governed by code.
That was my question. I'm going to ask another question that is related. Another question. Are there some criteria like chips or LEED, any mandated by the district?
So the district has not adopted either a LEED or CHIPS expectation for certification, but the current code in California, especially as it relates to school, brings us about to a LEED silver level because we've moved to all electric for HVAC as one example. And so our firm often uses the CHIPS criteria for those non-energy related or non-water related things. And those are all part of the best practices that will be applied here.
But there's no verification.
I don't think that they're going to be looking at a certification requirement because of costs related.
I think you had one more question about the smell from the water plant. Yes, the design includes a large opening in the middle of the school. This would funnel the smell from water plant to the school's outdoor spaces. Comments?
Funnel or, yeah, I don't know that it would funnel it. I think the outdoor space and the outdoor circulation of this campus will inherently include some of this current smells from that space. I think that the new construction does a very good job of blocking it to the best of our ability. But again, when teachers prop open a door or open a window, that will be controlled. I will say that our HVAC systems will have fans on them so that they can shut down the damper like you would in a fire if you have a bad smell day. So when it's on mechanical controls for the HVAC and their windows aren't and doors are not open, we can close some of that.
We're talking about the opening between the two buildings from north and south. Wouldn't it be better to have that closed off? I was talking more about the opening between the two buildings. Wouldn't it be better from a smell perspective to have that be like a glazed surface or something closed and not an opening?
Well, all of the circulation into the classrooms is outdoors, so we might block it from there, but you know, it's in the air. So we could certainly explore it, but I don't see that as a major issue. Yes. Yeah, no, thank you.
We work
Thanks.
here. It still stinks every day.
Okay, thank you. If CEQA won't complete until July 2025, will this push back the project start by a year?
So any permit, any work, anything, any commitment, any ordering of anything cannot happen until we get CEQA approval, which is currently anticipated to be in July 2025. Once we get that approval and board ratification, then we can plan what are the next steps. And that has yet to be determined whether it is depending on how long it will take to schedule activities, order lead times, etc. So it will not happen until after July 25. Whether it's 5 months or a year after, we don't know that yet.
And your slide did show where the delays came from, right? I mean, we had a slide that showed sort of the genesis of some of the delays that are putting us into July of 2025.
Okay, next question is from, sorry, a comment?
Here has a question.
Thank you. Sorry, I thought you were done with the Zoom. Regarding the updated modernization timeline. I'm not clear, I might have missed this in earlier meetings, but you go, Ryan or Nimno, I can't pronounce your, Nimyo and Moore is doing PEA work plan, PEA site sampling and report, and post-closure land use plan, correct? And then the next thing says draft EIR public review period. Who's doing that and who's initiating the EIR? I don't get how you go from one to the other? Is it the Department of Toxic Control Substances, or how does that happen? That's what I'm not clear. And the other question related to all this is, I might have missed this and I apologize, but, why is everything being delayed environmentally speaking? Why is this whole timeline delayed? Because, obviously it's a list of previously and, I might have missed this. I'm sorry. And then the current anticipated timeline, what's the reason for all these delays?
Sandrine, before you answer, I think I'm a layperson. I think people think CEQA is something, and I think people think the EIR, draft EIR is something different. And so when we say CEQA is done, we mention a draft EIR and a notice of determination. Can you explain how that is CEQA? If I'm outlining it correctly, and then hit the next section.
And I'll have Ryan talk about the delay and why. But, and we've shown that before, but there's really two CEQA processes, right? There's what Ryan was talking about, which is the PEA part, and that's going to have its own process. It will be mentioned in the CEQA process or the CEQA document, but it's really two different processes. There's the PEA and we're going through our environmental impact report, two different things. And yet they're tied, but separate. The CEQA process, the EIR process, includes a draft that will be released, and we're going to ask the public to review and provide any comments, and we'll incorporate. What? Yeah, the district hired a consultant. Their name is Grissetti Consulting.
And the
There-
question was, who prepares the EIR draft, just for those who didn't hear?
Right. So they're preparing that document with input from a lot of specialists. Yes.
I'll have to get this.
Yes, it is underway. It is being prepared.
Name of the company, maybe somebody.
Grissetti.
Rossetti.
Richard.
Okay, so they're already working on it. All right.
So,
That was
so then to the delays, the question about the delays.
Yeah. And then to the delays, inherently with environmental process, especially in California, there's a lot of regulations to be followed and there's a process for everything. So inherently, environmental processes are on the slower end of processes. With this site particularly, it's special in that it has the DTSC process, but also the LEA, who also oversees the regulatory oversight. So initially, there was some confusion between the agencies, as the DTSC was assumed the, primary responsible agency for the PEA process, which they are. So the LEA was initially deferring to the DTSC. As we moved through the process, the LEA determined they also need to be involved in reviewing reports.
So
The
the
LEA
LEA is, so.
Sorry, Marin
but-
County,
but-
the local
But not the school
enforcement.
district. So we call school districts LEAs as well. So the local
Okay.
enforcement
Got it.
agency, which is
Marin County.
Marin County, which,
They were deferring to DTSC to oversee the PEA process. Because this is what DTSC does, so they deferred. As we started moving through the process, the LEA determined they also need to be included in the PEA process and review the reports to ensure that data was collected that would satisfy their post-closure land use needs as well. So as we started preparing the work plan, we had to additionally send it to the LEA after DTSC had already reviewed. And now you have two regulatory agency bodies reviewing it. And it started going back and forth with addressing their comments and have to resubmit to both agencies and address comments. And it got to just a little confusion initially between the agencies, and now it's been a better understanding where both agencies stand.
And we have a regular meeting now with the county. So we bring all those agencies together now. So we just had one today, so that everybody's in the same room, hearing the same information, and if there's questions, we can answer them right away. No, that's not the case. The question was, is it because the initial EIR didn't mention it was being included on top of a burn dump? And my understanding is that's not the case.
No, that's not the case.
Okay, next question. I presume this is a design build project and the project has been awarded to the Flint and Leonakis team after a competition. Is that correct?
The question is they're presuming that it's a design build project and it's been awarded to Lionakis and Flint. Is that correct?
No, so Lionakis was selected through a qualifications-based selection process where we put our statement of qualifications to the district and interviewed for the project. Similarly, Flint was selected separately through a qualifications-based selection process in what's called a lease-leaseback delivery model. And in that model, the district is able to bring the general contractor on board for pre-construction services to provide the kind of estimating, logistical, and other support to the project. We then work in tandem, but we are not a single entity as is presumed in a design build project.
Okay. Next question is, are we still spending money on the design while waiting on CEQA results?
Just in one of the slides today, it said the project is on hold. So the statement is that the project's on the hold right now.
Is this a CHPS verified project?
That I think was the question about the chips that was answered earlier by Laura, that
Yeah.
it's aligned, but
Aligned, but not going through the process of getting certification.
Okay, so thank you for that. I want to note that we have about 10 additional questions and one more design related question. So I want to take the temperature to
I would
find out
say
how we're feeling.
we said we're ending at 7.
And
So I think we need to hold, I mean, I would think potentially the one more design, but I really want to honor people's time. And also just a quick shout out to the members of our CBOC who are here. They certainly don't need to be here tonight, but I am grateful that they have come and had the opportunity to listen live and in person. So thank you all who are here. But let's take the last
The
question and
last
then make
question
sure
on
that we
design.
adhere
Okay.
to our timelines.
Very good. So please list the additional requirements that DTSC and the county are requiring for your PEA work plan and what new tests are added and why.
All the requirements are the ones we discussed with all the sampling locations and the chemicals to be analyzed for soil vapor and water. Those were both agreed upon by DTSC and Marin County LEA.
Did you want to speak maybe to the post-closure land use plan? Because I think that may be what people suspect is an additional regulatory effort on the part of the county.
Yeah, sure. So the post-closure land use plan is the document that will guide how construction is developed and planned to make sure that any future design of the buildings and of the protective cap that's not in a building will be protective of the students and the staff and the community. So the post-closure land use plan is the document that incorporates all the investigation results and summarizes it into a detailed plan of how to move forward with it, and then also estimates, costs and long-term monitoring and maintenance of the site. So that is the main document that the Marin County LEA is overseeing the project for. That document is what guides the current any proposed construction and future long-term use of the Mill Valley Middle School property.
And when you refer to post-closure, it's post-closure of the landfill, right?
Yes, just
Okay.
because the landfill is no longer active, it's considered closed. So any post-closure land use of the landfill that's already closed has to be approved and regulated by the LEA, Marin County LEA. Yeah, that was one of their comments, and that has been included in our preliminary endangerment assessment. That's part of the whole process, is to propose what we want to look for, and then they review it and provide any recommendations that they think might have been overlooked. And then we incorporate those into the document, goes back into review, and then once it's finally approved from both agencies, then we implement what has been agreed upon.
And Ryan, is that specific to this particular site, or do we often go back and forth with DTSC and an enforcement agency that's overseeing our projects?
It's very common to go back and forth with what's required. And specifically for the radiation and the methane that's related to landfill use. And in my experience doing it, I've never had reports submitted and never received no comments back or no recommendations. It's a typical process that they go through.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We will have, oh,
Let me just, I think we should wrap, but we'll come certainly answer as well. But I wanted just to make sure, I wanted to thank folks for coming, and the remaining questions that we have, we can certainly try to answer. I don't know if they're delivered by a person or not, but we can certainly review them if they're not anonymous or add them to our FAQ. So I do want to make sure that we're adhering to our time, and thank you. But these guys are all yours, Carrie, as soon as we conclude. So let's finish our.